All right, so imagine this. You're just going about your daily life, right? Contributing to your community. Maybe you've got a small business, your kids are in school, things are, relatively stable.
Right.
And then suddenly, bam, the government's like, hey, guess what? We're thinking about hitting you with a daily fine just for being here.
Oh, wow.
And it's not a small fine either. We're talking $998 every single day.
Every day.
Every single day, just for existing,
Yeah.
essentially, without authorization. And get this, they might even try to make it retroactive for like 5 years.
5 years. So, like, potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines.
Potentially way more, actually. Like, think, over $1 million for some people.
That's just, I mean, how is that even feasible?
Yeah, and that's just one of the many, many questions we're going to be digging into today as we try to unpack this whole situation.
This is quite a lot to process.
It is, right. It sounds almost too crazy to be true, but it is, unfortunately, very real. We're talking about a new policy push from the Trump administration, and it's causing a lot of waves. Essentially, they're looking to impose these massive fines on undocumented immigrants who have existing deportation orders. And if they can't pay, well, they're talking about going after their assets. So in this deep dive, we're going to try to understand where this idea came from, what it could actually mean for people on the ground, and just how they think they're going to pull this off logistically. Because let's be real, this is a huge undertaking.
Absolutely. There are so many layers to this. It's not just about the legal framework, which in itself is complex,
Right.
but also the practicalities, the human cost, the impact on families and communities.
Yeah.
It's a lot to unravel.
It really is. So to start, let's break down this $998 daily fine. I mean, for many people, that's basically their entire income, if not more.
Yeah, it's an extraordinary sum to be facing on a daily basis.
Mm.
Imagine trying to budget for that, knowing that every day it's just racking up.
And then you factor in the retroactivity, potentially going back 5 years. I mean, that could add up to what, like almost $2 million? It's just mind-boggling.
And we did hear from a senior Trump administration official, speaking anonymously, of course, that, yeah, some individual fines could actually exceed $1 million. It's not hyperbole. This is a real possibility.
$1 million hanging over your head just for being here. And they're saying this is based on a law from 1996 from the Clinton era.
That's right. So the concept itself isn't entirely new. This law has existed for decades, but its use has been very limited and targeted.
So why now? Why dust off this decades-old law and wield it in such a, frankly, aggressive way? Is it just me, or does this feel like a significant escalation?
Well, it definitely represents a major shift in approach. I mean, we saw a glimpse of this back in 2018 during Trump's first term when they tried to use it against some migrants who had sought sanctuary in churches.
Right, and that was already very controversial at the time. And then during the Biden administration, that use of the law was basically paused.
Exactly. They essentially put a stop to those specific applications. So to see it being revived now and on such a massive scale, it's definitely raising eyebrows, to say the least.
So let's say someone can't pay this daily fine, which, let's be honest, most people probably wouldn't be able to. What happens then?
Well, that's where the concept of property seizure comes in. And this is where it starts to get really, really concerning.
Because we're not just talking about, like, taking someone's house if they haven't paid property taxes or something. They're talking about using civil asset forfeiture, which, for anyone who's not familiar, is basically a legal tool that allows the government to seize property that they suspect is connected to criminal activity, even if the owner hasn't been convicted of a crime.
Right. It's a powerful tool and one that has been criticized in the past for being prone to abuse. And in this context, they're essentially equating being undocumented and unable to pay this massive fine with criminal activity.
And they're not being subtle about their intentions either. From what we're hearing, the White House is really pushing for this. They're talking about involving CBP, Customs, and Border Protection in literally going out and seizing assets.
We've even seen mentions of bringing in the Department of Justice's forfeiture division, which really underlines the level of seriousness they're attaching to this.
And if you try to picture how this would play out in real life, it's pretty disturbing. We're talking about ICE agents showing up at people's homes and taking their belongings. TVs, cars, maybe even things like kids' toys. It's almost dystopian.
It's a very stark picture. And from a logistical standpoint, the sheer volume of assets they potentially be dealing with and the administrative burden of managing all of that is just mind-boggling.
So you've got this looming threat of a daily fine that could bankrupt you and the possibility of losing all your possessions. But there is apparently a way out. They're calling it the Self-Deport app.
Right, so the administration is pointing people towards an app called CBP Home. You might remember it as CBP-1. It was initially used for things like processing asylum claims and managing entry at ports.
So basically, they're repurposing an existing app to now be a tool for self-deportation.
Essentially, yes. It's being framed as a way for undocumented immigrants with deportation orders to arrange their own departure from the United States.
So the choice is either face this massive financial burden and the risk of losing your belongings, or use this app to leave the country voluntarily. It's quite a stark choice, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And it raises questions about whether this really qualifies as voluntary when the alternative is so incredibly punitive.
Speaking of punitive, who's actually behind all of this? Who's pushing for these changes?
Well, the reports point to the White House National Security Council being heavily involved, and specifically Stephen Miller.
Ah, yes, a familiar name in immigration policy circles. He's been a driving force behind many of the administration's most controversial immigration policies.
Right, and he seems to be playing a key role here as well. But it's not like everyone's on board with this. There seems to be quite a bit of pushback, even from within the government.
Oh, yeah, big time. Like, we've seen a leaked memo from CBP outlining some serious concerns about the feasibility of all this. Apparently, they're saying they would need to hire something like 1,000 new paralegals just to handle the sheer volume of fines that would be generated.
1,000 new paralegals.
Yeah, that's what the memo says. And that doesn't even address the costs of actually processing all these seizures, storing the assets, figuring out what to do with them. It's a massive logistical undertaking.
And where would they even find that many qualified people? And who's going to pay for all this? It doesn't seem like they've fully thought this through.
Right. It's like they're trying to build a skyscraper on a foundation of sand. And if CBP can't handle it, they're talking about passing it off to IC.
I see. They're already completely overwhelmed with their current workload. Adding this on top of everything else would just be...
A recipe for disaster. Yeah, pretty much.
It's almost as if the focus is solely on punishment, with little regard for the practical realities of implementation or the broader impact on the individuals involved.
Exactly. And that brings us to what I think is the most crucial part of this discussion, the human cost. Because at the end of the day, we're not talking about statistics or abstract legal concepts. We're talking about real people, families, communities.
Right, and it's important to remember that many undocumented immigrants live in mixed-status households. That means there are family members who are U.S. citizens or legal residents living with someone who's undocumented.
And according to FWD.US, there's something like 10 million people living in these mixed status households. So when we talk about these fines and asset seizures, we're not just targeting individuals, we're impacting entire families, including people who are here legally.
Exactly, and those families are part of our communities. They're our neighbors, our friends, our coworkers.
And to Scott Schuchart's point, he's the former ICE policy advisor we mentioned earlier, this whole thing feels more like a fear campaign than an actual workable enforcement strategy.
I mean, how do you realistically expect to collect millions of dollars from people who are already struggling? The Migration Policy Institute found that 26% of undocumented households are living below the poverty line.
It just doesn't make sense. And that really makes you question what the true objective here is. Is it really about deterring undocumented immigration, or is it about something else entirely?
Yeah, it's a valid question, and it's one that I think we need to keep asking as this situation continues to unfold.
And it's not just a domestic issue either. This has international implications as well.
Absolutely. We're seeing other countries react to this shift in U.S. policy. For example, India's Ministry of External Affairs recently reported to their parliament that 682 Indian nationals have been deported from the U.S. since January of this year, mainly for illegal entry.
So while those deportations aren't directly tied to these proposed fines, it does show that the issue of immigration is very much a global one, with other countries closely watching and responding to U.S. policy changes.
And the Indian government mentioned that they're in talks with the U.S. about things like mobility frameworks and cracking down on smuggling. So this isn't happening in a vacuum. It has ripple effects across the globe.
Right, and those effects can be complex and unpredictable. But let's circle back to the logistics for a moment. Even if they wanted to implement this whole fine and seizure scheme, how could they possibly make it work?
That's the million-dollar question, or should I say the multi-million-dollar question. As we've discussed, the staffing and funding issues within CBP and ICE are already huge. To make this work, they would need a massive influx of resources and personnel, And it's just not clear where those would come from.
And then there's the impact on the immigration court system. It's already drowning in backlogs. If all these retroactive fines lead to legal challenges, which they almost certainly will, the whole system could just grind to a halt.
Exactly. There are likely to be legal challenges on multiple fronts.
Hmm.
Due process concerns, claims of disproportionate impact on low-income individuals, potentially even equal protection arguments. This could tie up the courts for years.
So we have a policy with a lot of moving parts, a lot of potential legal pitfalls, and some serious logistical hurdles to overcome. And all of that is without even considering the ethical implications and the very real human cost.
It's a lot to grapple with. And the timeline for all of this is still very unclear. The Department of Homeland Security is being pretty tight-lipped about when or even if they plan to actually implement these changes.
So for now, we're left with a lot more questions than answers. But to recap, what we do know is that the Trump administration is exploring the possibility of imposing incredibly hefty daily fines on undocumented immigrants who have deportation orders, potentially going back 5 years. And if those fines aren't paid, they're talking about seizing people's assets to make up the difference.
And it's worth emphasizing again that while this is based on a law that's been around for a while, the scale and the intensity with which it's being considered are potentially unprecedented. This could have a profound impact on the lives of millions of people.
Absolutely. So, as you listen to all of this, we want to encourage you to think about the complexities at play here. We've talked about the legal framework, the logistical challenges, the human cost, and the international ramifications. It's a lot to take in.
And we haven't even touched on the broader philosophical questions. What is the ultimate goal of immigration policy? Is it about enforcement, deterrence, compassion, or something else entirely?
Those are all big questions, and they're ones that deserve careful consideration. So, as this story continues to develop, we want to leave you with something to ponder. What do you think the long-term consequences of a policy like this might be, not just for the individuals directly affected, but for the entire country?
And how do we, as a society, balance the need for border security with the human rights of all individuals, regardless of their immigration status?
It's a complex issue with no easy answers, but it's one that we all need to be thinking about. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.